Welcome to Daniell Beaver Banks Preserve, home of the Shasta Land Trust. We are so excited to have all of you here tonight, despite the rain, and hopefully you guys are staying dry and having some good food. I want to tell you a little story about how this property came to be, how we are here today, and then I'll hand it off to the Daniell family, who will talk a little bit about their dad and their family's memory here. But before we get into that, I want to say we have some dignitaries in the area. So we have Mayor Resner, we have Supervisor Rickert, we have Supervisor Modi, Sheriff Johnson, Vice Mayor Baron Browning, Shasta County CEO Matt Pontes, and a bunch of other friends. So thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate the support. So back in December of 2020, I sat down with the Daniell family, and we had a conversation about this property and what it meant to them. They didn't know much about the land trust. Harry had been involved since 1998, and they knew they wanted to make sure this property was protected forever. We didn't know quite yet at that point how to do it. We knew that we needed a new office. We knew we had outgrown our space on West Street, and we knew that really on this property, it was endless possibilities. Their goal was to make sure this property was protected forever. And so they wanted to place a conservation easement on this property and donated it to us at the very same time. That wasn't possible because in California you can't own the property and also conserve it at the same time. So we said, you know what, we can go ahead and conserve it. You find somebody to buy it and remodel into our office. And so throughout December and January and February, we worked a deal with the Daniell family and Red Emerson and the Emerson family for them to buy this property and turn it into our dream office. And what you can see today, it all was made possible. The Daniell family wanted to make sure at the end of the day this property was protected. And I can stand on the stage and say today, this property will be protected forever. A conservation easement on this property will make sure it's never turned into a shopping center. It'll make sure this property stays wild. And the 7 acres we have here today will always stay Shasta Land Trust office and home to wildlife and the amazing river frontage, which you really can't beat. And so for many of you, the history of the Land Trust is great. We grew from 1998 into a small one-person office into what we have today with some amazing staff, amazing board members, and really all of you here today, which makes this possible. Our volunteers, our supporters, our donors, members of the community and stakeholders make this dream today possible. And the fact that you're all sitting out in the rain means we know how much you care about it. And so you're going to get a chance to speak about and listen to Daniell family talk about their dream, but I want to really talk about them. And so their dream was to make sure this property was protected forever. And they wanted to make sure that we could also have an office out here. And that was made possible. They have stories out on this property we've got to know over the last year and a half that are immense. And I'm really excited to announce them today so they can tell you a little bit more about their dad and their mom and really share more to you about what this means to them. So I'll hand it off to Richard, and then Richard will go ahead and announce the rest. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Paul. I'm Richard, and I am the husband of Suzanne Daniell. I'm up here because I drew the short straw when the two Daniell daughters decided who was going to say what at this event. And really, Suzanne and Jennifer were very generous in saying, all you have to do is give the introduction, Richard. And then they started adding on. So with that said, when you see me again, you'll know it's time for the conclusion. And with that, my history here is relatively short. I've only been involved with the family for 25 years. So I think it's only proper that Suzanne and Jennifer be the ones, to share memories of their parents and their life and stories of Beaver Banks.
Richard was supposed to sing, but we could not prevail on him to do that. So it's really great to be here with all of you today, with my sister Jennifer and my husband Richard, who we just met. We really want to, along with the extended Daniell family, express how deeply grateful we are to Shasta Land Trust, Mr. Red Emerson and his family, and SPI for collaborating with us on this effort. This project is really a dream come true for us. It really exceeds what we could have ever imagined as a family. It's also testimony to what can happen when people cooperate and dream together. We wanted to try to give you a little idea about the love that our family had for this piece of land, and to also make a brief tribute to our folks who nurtured not only us, but this very special place. And then finally, we want to remember our dad, Harry Daniell, whom, as you are all aware, passed away last year. And I'm going to let Jennifer tell the first part of the story.
My parents were originally from Pennsylvania and Maine, and they shared a passion for the out-of-doors. This led Bobby and Harry west. Eventually, they settled in Reading for the combination of warm weather for Bobby, professional opportunity for Harry, unlimited recreational options, and a community in which their young family could thrive. This property, now known as the Daniell Beaver Banks Preserve, was purchased in 1969 from Lou Gerard Sr., and the original home was remodeled, and we moved in as a family in 1970. Wildlife constantly enchanted us, although there remains a debate on how entertaining the frequent skunks really were. After an initial get-acquainted period, the resident beavers became a favorite, and ultimately, after they chewed down a fair number of my mother's shrubbery, they ultimately became the namesake of the property. Our co-inhabitants included deer, turkeys, otters, fox, and an enormous variety of birds. Occasionally, the encounters were close ones, like when a duck flew down the chimney into the living room, which is now the conference room. My father captured it in a cat crate and restored it outside. The home served as the base. For many outdoor activities in the surrounding public lands, as well as many gatherings here with family and friends. Over the years, we fished from the riverbanks, floated the river, raised a few cows, and kept multiple horses, cats, and dogs. We hayed the pasture, and the resident teenagers, Suzanne and I, were required to weed star thistle, pull Johnson grass, and pick rocks out of the pasture. Because Harry was not very mechanically minded, in spite of the fact that he was an engineering major for 2 years before he switched to pre-med, the mechanical activities fell to my mother, and that involved maintaining all of the farm equipment, such as tractors, riding mowers, and so forth. In addition to her mechanical duties, Bobby kept pigeons and peacocks. She enjoyed countless hours developing and tending her extensive gardens, which we are thrilled to have them restored and improved beyond their original splendor. It's gratifying. Bobby knew the Latin name of every one of her plantings. She was very active in local land use planning issues for many years, striving to protect the agricultural land and riparian habitat, ultimately co-founding with others the Churn Creek Bottom Homeowners Association. She continued in those efforts even as her health declined. During her final years, Harry was her primary caregiver and a devoted companion, creatively helping her to enjoy and remain on the property she so dearly loved until the end of her life.
I get to talk about the medical career. Dad found in Reading the opportunity to explore all of his many passions, and the rest of us just struggled to keep up. He was intensely curious in a wide variety of subjects and had the energy to match. A good example of this was his infatuation with our friends, the resident beavers. On one occasion, he climbed down the riverbank and up into one of their lodges. He returned with tales of his discoveries covered in mud, but very, very pleased with himself. Obviously, Harry set a pace that was hard to match. Eventually, after our mother died, friends who are in the audience today, I'm not sure if they will identify themselves, arranged for him to meet Joanne Lockwood. Joanne could more than keep up with Harry, and together they had numerous adventures. Some would say this is an understatement. Joanne became a treasured member of our family, passing away a few years ago. Professionally, Dr. Daniell practiced for 50 years in Reading. He derived great joy from his patients, serving them with his tremendous compassion and intellect. I suspect a few of those lucky folks are in the audience today, and in fact, I know that's true. He founded the residency program at Mercy Hospital and continued to mentor the residents until the age of 88. His extraordinary curiosity and keen observational powers led to multiple independent research studies, resulting in at least 130 peer-reviewed scientific publications. This is highly unusual for a physician in solo practice in a small city, and his contributions to the medical literature were wide-ranging. One example of his discoveries is the link between smoking and premature aging of the skin, fondly known in the family as the wrinkle paper. This particular observation generated widespread media attention and interviews with Time, Newsweek, the BBC, as well as Paul Harvey. I'm sure there's plenty of us old enough to remember Paul, Ann Landers, and the Surgeon General of the United States, who used Dad's research as an example to his own residents as evidence of the impact someone could have even if you practiced in a small community. Harry also proved that smoking is one of the leading causes of osteoporosis, otherwise known as brittle bones, an observation that has clearly impacted millions of people. Harry was particularly proud of his discovery that narcotic drugs suppress the body's production of testosterone. Because of this research, the FDA now requires this information to accompany all narcotic prescriptions. We hope that there will be at least one or two final publications which were in preparation at the time of his passing, if Jennifer and I can manage to pull all that together. Harry recharged his batteries in the out of doors, as many of you know. This included hiking, fishing, and hunting for antique bottles. The bottle hunting involved hiking to remote sites of old mines and digging in the abandoned outhouses for discarded bottles. He particularly enjoyed finding Prohibition-era patent medicine bottles and bottles of regional historical interest. On a couple of occasions, his enthusiasm led him to dig holes deep enough in the quest for bottles he had trouble climbing back out. Many of you will remember the display of bottles in the entryway in this house. Many of those bottles are now at the Shasta Historical Society as well as other regional museums. And then, of course, there was running. He was a modestly successful collegiate runner, and after a 20-year break, he took up running again in his mid-40s, like many of us, to shed excess pounds. We had a chart posted on the refrigerator and a weigh-in every Sunday evening, right before a dish of ice cream. He had long been infatuated with the Boston Marathon, which he ran multiple times. The family story is that he had an entry when he was in college, but was unable to hitchhike quickly enough to Boston to make the starting line. Over 4 decades, he completed a total of 64 marathons, completing his last marathon at age 83. He was an accomplished age group runner, repeatedly running under 3 hours for the marathon in his 50s. His last competitive race was also one of his favorites, the Mount Shasta 4th of July 5-mile run, which he completed at the age of 91, 9 months before he passed away.
Well, I'm back, so it must be time for the conclusion. Are you ready? If Harry were here today, he would be the first to tell you how excited he is that the property is now the home of the Shasta Land Trust. Indeed, he asked repeatedly for updates on the project during the last weeks of his life. What we are celebrating here today far exceeds our family's vision and hope for the preservation of this modest parcel and the chance to share it with others. Harry didn't just think outside the box, he lived there. Harry often said life is a combination of good genes, hard work, and a dash of good luck, and he had all 3 in spades. I don't believe that he ever saw himself as the owner of this property, merely its custodian. He and Bobby, I'm sure, would be most pleased that the Shasta Land Trust has now become the next custodian of Beaver Banks. I discovered just a few moments ago that that wasn't really my conclusion. I was informed that I would have the honor, actually, and I do consider it to be an honor, to introduce Christy Lanham, the Community Relations Manager, and for Shasta SPI and and the foundation. And before I just hand this microphone to Christy, I'm reminded that sometimes in life we get to be a witness to history. In January of 2020, I suspect Christy will mention it too, I had the distinct honor and pleasure to be in what is now the conference room, which was the formal dining room of Beaver Banks, of the Daniell family. And Christy came down the driveway with Red Emerson. We sat around as a family, and by the time that little gathering was over, these two 90-year-olds looked at each other, eyeball to eyeball, and essentially said, let's get this done. And so here we are. And I'm going to turn it now to Christy to give a little bit of that kind of background. Christy.
Finally, a podium tall enough. So, good afternoon. It is truly an absolute pleasure and privilege to be here today. We're proud of not only what was accomplished in just this short time since that brief introduction over coffee, and two immense stewards of natural resources, and as if they were cut from the same cloth. But as we celebrate today the grand opening of the Daniell Beaver Banks Preserve and the new home of the Shasta Land Trust, I wanted to share just a bit about the vision. So the vision was the lifelong mission of Dr. Daniell and his beloved Bobby. They built their home on this beautiful soil that was built on this beautiful soil we're standing on today. Raised their family here, beautiful daughters, enjoyed raising livestock, riding horses. We've got rodeo queens on the stage. Okay? And their family, with their whole hearts, valued the natural beauty of this riverside and what the land provided for over 60, 70 plus years, forming lifetime and lifelong memories that we hope to continue here. Their dream was to ensure their rich agricultural and riverside property would be preserved and serve as a community gathering place, a place of education and outreach, and to be enjoyed by future generations. I'm very honored to be here today on behalf of Red and Maria, and I apologize for not being in town to make it. But they too are wholeheartedly committed to preserving these rich agricultural soils, protecting all of the wildlife, including the new mountain lion that we continually see on trail cams, protecting that wildlife and the habitat that thousands of species currently thrive in, along with our world-class riverside here on the Sacramento River. It's a very special day for the Daniell family, Emerson family, and I can tell you relentlessly, Red, our community partners, so many local contractors, Rotarians, community members, donors. I was visiting all of them, asking for help for a whole new roof. Steve Rhodes with ST Rhodes Construction just finished the beautiful entry paving project, and to help us with some of the water control, which, thank you, Steve, it'll come in handy today. But all of those partners who were wholeheartedly committed to preserving and supporting this partnership. I have a special thanks to the Shasta Land Trust Board of Directors and staff. Would you mind standing quickly? I promise not to call you all out, but your work over the years is invaluable. And they too, while Red and Maria own the land, it's been signed a long-term lease. It's a conserved property, and as the new, as you mentioned, holders and trustees to carry forward the mission and vision here. But it is much more than a dedication ceremony or grand opening. It signifies the long-term dedication to the residents of Shasta County, the partners' commitment to the preservation of our natural resources at the gateway of our city and at the absolute heart of Shasta County. I wanted to mention, I'll try to get through it without more tears, but Dr. Daniell was a long-standing community champion. As you've heard, he was all in, not only for the community's health, conservation, our youth, but truly the future of Shasta County. And at the table that morning, those two souls that sat there and agreed that they should do more, they could do more, and they would. And it was over honest words and a handshake that this bond and project began. But Jennifer and Suzanne, your father was an incredible man. I was honored to meet him. Wish there were so many others that had the same opportunity, or those that did know and love him. You know where we stand. Your mother was a trailblazer as well for ag and for our community here in Sugar Creek Bottom, along with the Gray family as well, our two early doctors here in the North State. But we're a grateful community and honored to be here this afternoon as we celebrate their lives and legacy. And with our whole hearts, know that your parents' legacy will live on forever here at the Daniell Beaver Banks Preserve. And before I move on, I would be remiss, I know we named a couple of the partners on the project, but it was critically important because it was a heavy lift, and to take on a project of this size, I have broad shoulders, but they're not that broad. So Sandy Bade with Red Door Designs was the lead with me on the renovations of the house and property. ST Rhodes Construction, as I mentioned, with our drive. Big Time Pest Control helped with the early pest issues we had on site and continue to be on call. Century Plumbing, we flipped a couple bathrooms. They donated supplies, services, labor. Walner Plumbing, ACs, more plumbing, electrical panels across the board for the pumps and wells. Giles Lock and Key, we wanted to keep that beautiful front entry of this home that had been there for years, that farmhouse door, and they were able to restore and keep it in operating condition. Caliber office supplies and furniture that helped our land trust staff get all new office set up. Cascade Paint, Biggins Lighting, of course, Dr. Daniel's family for their ongoing contributions and commitment to the land trust. DNA Construction, Ryan Burke's Construction. Ryan Denham even stepped in to throw us and help out when we needed an oven and stove. And lastly, law offices of Campbell, Clark, and Vanilla. So we can give them a resounding round of applause. And many of the partners, and yes, Red, as humble and quiet as he is, he didn't bat an eye. And I walked in with a lot of invoices and repair orders. And it was, if we need to get this done, let's do it. So with that, I would just ask if you've got a glass in front of you, if you'd raise it to celebrate with us the legacy landscape we set on in honor of Dr. Daniel. May this conservation easement and preserve do just that. We hope and pray it will preserve our bountiful riverside, serve as an extraordinary setting for education and community conservation, and I assure you it's in wonderful hands. Hear, hear to Dr. Daniels and the entire Daniel